Hello and welcome to our next tutorial. Today I want to talk about weather maps. You might have seen on other YouTube videos that I've already been talking about weather map extensions we had in release 10 with tooltip charts and statistics and so on. You might also have seen the webinar on capacity metrics, which has been added with release 11 and where I'm using weather maps for additional statistics analysis. And you might also have seen another snapshot webinar about advanced weather map handling using the REST API. This is additional information that you can look at. In this webinar, in this tutorial here, I want to specifically focus on the general weather map handling, starting from scratch, how you can create a weather map and what are the different functions that you can find there. Real quick, before starting with the technical details, some information about weather maps in general in StableNet. Weather maps are a key feature to be used for displaying a lot of information for holistic management on one screen. To get a quick overview, you can, as you can see in this example here in this dashboard, with a weather map, you can combine topological information with traffic information, with detailed information on the different devices and links. You can have tables and charts and also use tooltips to get further information. The weather maps in general can either be used in dashboards, or you can have picture URLs that you can share with basically everyone. If they are tokenized, you don't even need to have a login to the StableNet system and you can still see the dashboard. So this makes it also easy to share with external people or people in other departments. And they are also a base for being used in the mobile app of StableNet to have something at your fingertips. So it's really a central resource for a quick overview. And now let's look into this a bit in more detail. Here you can see a weather map on the right side about one of the use cases we have realized in our demo lab. I will not so much go into the details of that use case today, but I will explain some of the components here that you see in the weather map. And to that end, I'm actually jumping from that dashboard overview that we see here, where the whole weather map is displayed. I'm actually jumping to the weather map itself in this weather map view, where you can see the whole weather map, and there you can already see that you have a lot of different components. You have, first of all, you have weather map nodes, single nodes, and nodes that are grouped in different groups. For instance, here you have a group of 3 nodes that can also be modified separately and that you can also open and close separately. So I'm closing it and I'm opening it again here. You have as well text boxes, for instance, the text box here, which is again included in a group, so you can close it and open it, or another text box down here. You have image URLs, which in this case are hidden in a group, but I can, for instance, open this one and I will get a picture here. And I have already mentioned the links. So you really have a lot of different elements here in this weather map. And with the panel up here, you are also able to add additional elements like URL images, URL tables, nodes, links, and so on and so forth. Now let's maybe look a little bit more before going into some of the details of that weather map that we can return to later on in that tutorial. Let's maybe first look into how you can generally create weather maps in StableNet to get started. Obviously, one option which seems to be the most obvious here is to create a new weather map from this menu here. We can give it a name, for instance, test weather map. Next, we can set up the link traffic, how this should be shown. This is an additional option for the capacity metric module, which you can see in that separate YouTube video. So in this case, we will just show the last measurement value. And then we can also add tags. So this is a possibility to provide additional tags to make sure that these weather maps appear in the right places, in the right trees, and that you can filter on those weather maps. Again, for more tagging, there is a separate tutorial. And you can do the user rights here. And this is actually the minimum setting to create a new weather map. So I just created this test weather map. And now I'm actually, when starting this weather map, I'm directly getting a dialog that asks me to add weather map nodes. So now I have the possibility to add nodes to this network, to this weather map here to start from. And I actually as you can see, I can not only add devices, but I could also add other types of elements. But I'm now focusing on devices first. And using an element filter, I can now use a tag filter, for instance, to get what I want, or I can just pick that from the tree. So maybe looking at the tree here, let's say I want to look into InfoSim headquarters, VLab, and I want to have a weather map of all the nodes which are included here in that VLab. So I would say, okay, that's it. So this is a list of elements that I will get. I want to skip duplicate nodes. This doesn't really apply here in this case because I don't have anything in my weather map yet. But normally, if I would be adding additional nodes to an existing map, I could say, if the node's already there, please skip it. I will add links for the devices. So this means if the devices are linked to each other, there will be links added, so that they appear directly as a topology. I could add some description to the nodes. I could intelligently directly add weather map links so that these nodes are linking to another weather map, for instance, and also web links and tooltips. For more about web links and tooltips, please also have a look at the other webinars that I gave about weather map extensions and advanced weather map handling, because there you can really see how this can be used in a powerful way, for instance, to open reports by clicking on certain elements in a weather map, or by getting like different sorts of tooltips. I will also be showing some tooltips in this tutorial video here. I could override the icon, which would mean that all the nodes that I'm adding are then getting a new icon that I can define here. If I'm leaving this blank, I will just use the default icon for each single element. So the icons will represent which type of element of device I have. And I could also hide the text, which would add the devices without showing actually a label, but I will also leave this as is. So let's click OK. And now what I actually got is all my devices that I previously selected with my element filter. And as I have selected add links, I also directly got my, my links between those devices. I can then also here use this layouting, like trying different layouts. Best practices show that not for each topology, each layout is equally good. But you can play around with that and find out which one might fit well for the particular need. So this is more hierarchical, maybe not ideal for this case. The orthogonal layout typically tends to be quite large in size, but can be useful as well in certain cases. The radial layout puts them more in that way. So really depends on what you specifically need. The typical standard layout would be the organic layout. And you can, of course, also move that layout, which actually, as you can see here, switches it to custom layout. So now the X and Y coordinates, so the positions of each single element, will be saved in the weather map itself. And as you can also see, when I'm moving this, I also get here signs that this is actually aligned to the grid. So this makes it easier to align the different elements if they should be exactly like with the same space between each other. So that is the first way of creating a weather map, and a little bit about the layout you saw already. So now the next thing I will do is create a weather map from a different place, which might be equally helpful or even more helpful depending on the specific use case you look at. What I will do now is create a weather map from my inventory. So I'm in my inventory theme now, looking at one of my inventory trees ordered by use cases. And here I'm actually looking at the different VLab devices again in my lab. And let's say I'm just picking one of these devices. And in this case, this is a Cisco device, and I'm actually looking at the neighborhood. This is my direct one-hop neighborhood, but I'm increasing this neighborhood by one, so I get my two-hop neighborhood. And now in order to get a little bit better overview of this, here I will one by one do different things in this weather map. First, I will say that I'm actually using a node filter, and I'm actually saying that I use a previously prepared custom tag VLab, and I'm actually going to the advanced mode here, and I will say that I only want devices where the VLab tag is actually being set. So if I do this, I already skip some of the other devices that are not tagged with VLab. And now I will do some more things here. I will actually use this button here on the right side, this gear icon, to get to an advanced configuration dialog, which is helping me to group my nodes and to put them in layers. So the first thing I will do is I will actually group them by the VLab tag. So I will use the tag that I just previously used to filter. And if I'm now zooming in for a moment, I can actually see that there is an automatic group Juniper created, a group Backbone created, and another group Cisco created. So this is what I did with this grouping here. And now in addition, like just making this fit the screen again. So this is the button to make it fit the screen. With plus and minus, obviously I can zoom in and zoom out. It is quite intuitive. I can reset the view as well in terms of the layout, and I can also make it uh, zoom to 100%, which makes it much larger in this case. So now let's go back to that. Group by tag category. Another thing I can do is layer it by tag category. I can choose another category here. For instance, let's say I'm choosing the device vendor. So in this case, I actually have three different, five different layers here, pardon me. So I have the Cisco devices on one layer, I have the Juniper devices on one layer, the Linux devices, the Microsoft devices, and the VMware devices, which ends up these groups being put into five different layers. But I could also say, in this case, let's say I actually want to use the same tag for the layering that I did for the grouping, which will make each group end up in one of the layers. So let's do that, clicking on VLab. And there we are. So now I have four groups, one of which is the tags are not available because they are not set. There is the Backbone, the Cisco, and the Juniper. This is because I have filtered out some of the devices. But those three layers are actually being used. And now we will actually put the Backbone in the middle. And I have the Cisco devices on top and the Juniper devices on the bottom. And what you can actually see now from this map here is that we have the Cisco devices building one subnetwork, having a lot of links in between those devices, and we have the Juniper devices building a second subset connected to a central node here in the backbone, and the connection between those different nodes is mainly going through that backbone, which is easily visible now by that hierarchical layout. Now let's continue with some more functionality. So let's say I have just too many links here, so I want to do a little bit something with the links. So the first thing I could do is, rather than showing all links, I could combine group links or combine all links. So here I'm combining the links, which actually means that now I'm having a lot less links, because if there are several parallel links between the same nodes, I will actually just show one of those. And this is also if all links going to a group should be combined or not. So you can really have different options here. I can, if the bandwidth is fixed, I can increase it to make it better visible, but I can also use the bandwidth of the interfaces or the traffic that is currently in the network to show the as the width of the networks. I can also put labels to those links, which obviously in such a tiny view will end up in not a lot to be seen, but I can generally do that. This typically takes some time to refresh, but anyway, it wouldn't make a lot of sense in this network here. And now getting back to what I originally wanted to do, I wanted to create a weather map out of that. So some of you might already have spotted that button that I just have a plus symbol here with a weather icon. So if I click that one, I just get a proposition for a weather map name, which typically corresponds to the name of the node that I have originally selected as base for this neighborhood map. And now I can obviously change that and click next, 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 and again create a weather map from that that I can then continue to work on. Maybe let's take this occasion here to explain those other icons here we see. So I already explained that setting icon. We also have a legend icon, which is showing me that there is a node filter active and what we are using for grouping and layering. And I can also, in standard in weather maps, you have tooltips. So if you move on nodes, you get the general view you get for a node is a ping chart for the node with the availability, but you can also freely configure this differently, which I show in this other webinar on weather map extensions. And if you go on a link, you typically get the traffic. In this case, exactly, you get the traffic between those two links. And for combined links, you would also get a combined view of the traffic. So if you are now going on a combined link, you will also get a combined view there. Exactly. And yes, and if you don't want these tooltips to appear when moving the mouse, sometimes they might be disturbing, you can just switch off the tooltips, which is also set here, enable, disable tooltips. And so now I can move freely without tooltips appearing and disturbing me. I guess that's about it about this view. As I said, if you use this plus icon, you can actually create a weather map and make it appear in the weather map theme. So now maybe as a next step, let's get back to that weather map theme and let's look a little bit more about other options that we have in this weather maps. To this end, I will actually again maybe go to this traffic generation weather map where I have already some elements included, and I will now in the next few minutes be explaining a little bit about these elements in the weather map. So we have already seen that we have nodes, and if I double click those nodes, I can again see the different settings of such a node and the different properties. On the one side, I have statistics settings, which can help me to add a lot of additional information for nodes like table-based views about availability, about all sorts of metrics. This is something we are heavily using, for instance, in the capacity metric space, but that is also been used in the normal space to get up-to-date data. Maybe I will show this real quick in another map here in the data center. Map, wait a second, I'm pulling up this map. For instance, here we have a map where we have this is loading for a short moment, but once it is loaded, you will actually see that you have tables underneath each of these elements. So these are statistics which are indicating additional information, or a more simple example is also in the self-monitoring map. In this map, which is not using any capacity planning, but this is like just a normal StableNet without this capacity planning module. We are showing here up-to-date information, and if I'm double-clicking this node, we can actually see that here we have different statistics configured. So each of these statistics, like availability last week, can again be configured with a separate dialog. Please have a look at as well at this Weather Map Extensions webinar where I'm showing this. Now, let's look here again on this traffic generation map. And we will now go through these points again. So each element in the weather map is actually having, if it's auto-created, it's having a reference. You can also change these references manually and or add different references. And these references are actually being used to add a status to that concrete element. So that's why we have a green sign, because this is indicating that the status of this device is actually green and it's going all right. There are no measurements in alarm state. Then there is a text. If we look at that text, we can actually find out several things at once. First of all, we can see that the text is what is appearing below the element as a label. And second, we can see that you can work with HTML code, like doing line breaks here to spread it into several lines. You can work with style information in HTML, like making it in a larger font size, or changing the color, in this case to a blue color. And you can also see that here exactly you can also address variables. So for instance, in this case, the IP addresses down here, they are not manually written, but they are actually created by $tag link source interface address. So we are using a variable here. For more information about that, please also have a look at the documentation. As always, the documentation can be found on docs.infosim.net. I can actually use that here to do a funny example. So I will put that here, like as a web link. I will just say http docsinfosim.net and save that element. And now I have actually, this is underlined now because I have added a web link to this element. And if I'm now selecting this element, right-clicking it and saying jump to web page, or I could also shift-click it and click on web page, then my browser will open and will actually open this docs portal here. And obviously, rather than using the docs portal, I could also add, for instance, links with using variables to jump to some dashboards or reports. Again, if you want to see that, please have a look at the other YouTube videos, like the one about Weathermap extensions. So now maybe as I'm here already, I'm logging into that documentation portal here. And there, if for instance you search for Weathermap, you can also, like weather map, you can also, for instance, see here that we have obviously a whole chapter here about weather maps in the documentation. But now let's get back to the rich client again. So I'm modifying this element again, removing this web link. I can directly link to other weather maps. So if I want this to be a jumping point for some drill down map or some overview map, I can directly add this. I can add different tooltip links. So if the general tooltip I want is not the one I like, I can add other examples here. I can change the icon. I can also tell here which hierarchy this has, so on which layer this is, if this should be in the background or in the foreground. And I can hide the text, which makes this description disappear and only visible in a tool tab. So let's do OK to make this web link be gone again. We have covered that with the notes, with the links. It's similar. So if this is a weather map text, okay, because this is in the background. So let's now modify. There are multiple links actually here. So I get a map multiple links. I can explain this because in this case we are combining the links. If I'm showing all the links, I will actually see that there are 3 separate links here. So if I want to modify a single link, I actually get something similar as for nodes. First of all, I have my statistics again, which are not being used here in this case. And then I have the different link settings. I have, in this case, I have one reference element, which is not being used in this case, but which I could use to add a reference to a link. And in addition, I have 2 additional references to a source interface and a destination interface, which helps me to work with additional variables if I want to address this automatically. We have texts that we can add to the links. We have descriptions in addition, which are shown in the tooltip. We have weather map links. Again, we have web links and tooltips links. So this is quite the same. We can optionally add arrows if we want to have the link to have an arrow. Exactly. And we could also say that the link has a different sort of label like absolute traffic, relative traffic, and so on. So much about links in this case. And with links and nodes, we actually have the largest components that we have in the weather maps. In addition, we have these group nodes. I can just double click that one again. A group node in general is similar. It can have a reference element, different types of weather map link, web link, tooltip link. But a group node, in addition, has the several nodes that it's containing, and it's automatically aggregating the state of. And I guess, what else can I show? Yes, in addition, like I can show this again. So if you are going to this color palette here, you will have the settings again about, like the settings about the links are here. And in this color palette, you actually get the possibility for adding different elements. So we have seen this one before. This is adding a group of nodes based on a filter. Here you can add a single node to the weather map, choosing a reference element. You can also create a new group based on the selection that you have. You can add a new text field to the weather map. So for instance, down here you have a text field. This is just a text field where you can add text, again using HTML styling. You can also have text using a border, which is the case here for Zagreb. So this is again a text, but in this case there is a check mark that a border should be shown. So that is why this text is having a black border. What else? You can add image URLs. So with image URLs, you can actually add a URL to an image, for instance, to an analyzer chart or to some other weather map or to some group analyzer chart. Which makes this picture appear in the weather map. Here you can do the same for URL tables. This is marked red because there's no URL provided yet, and the URL will first be validated to see if the URL is really providing a table. But that way you have the possibility to also add table-based information to such a weather map. And then there you have the possibility to add new images that you can put in the background. And last but not least, you also have the possibility to add links. You could either add a link manually between two devices, selecting both of them and clicking add the link, or you could just create automatically, creating the links from topology. In this case, StableNet will see all the devices that are already in the map and create the links in case there are technical links. So this means, summing up a little bit what I did show you in this tutorial. I did talk about the weather map theme in general. I did talk about how weather maps can be created, either using the wizard or creating a weather map from one of the dynamics neighborhood maps that you can get in the inventory. I did talk a little bit, very little bit about link traffic settings. I can show this real quick again. So you have these link traffic settings. This is something where you can, rather than showing the current value, you could also show, for instance, statistical values of the past using the capacity metric module. There is more about this in a specific webinar. I did tell you about different weather map elements like the nodes, group nodes, texts, images, tables, static images that you can add for background. I talked about links, and you've also quickly seen, while clicking me on a combined link, you have seen that several elements, if they are several elements are selected, you also have a multi-element dialog to edit. Yeah, and then I did quickly talk about element statistics, showing you some examples in this self-monitoring here. And I did also cover some of the specific, like element references and links, the weather map links, the web links, the tooltips. So, and last but not least, I also covered most of the functionality here in the toolbar. So I hope that with this, you got a good general overview how weather maps are working in StableNet. If you want to have any more information about that, please have a look also on the other videos on YouTube about weather maps, weather map extensions, advanced weather map handling, capacity metric module, or have a look at the documentation on docs.infosim.net, where you can find more information about that. Thank you very much.